Hi there. This is Susan Fuller from Grief Heals. When I was in graduate school, which was a long time ago, one of my practicums was in a psych hospital. One day I'd been upstairs and I was coming down from the locked unit to the unlocked unit, and there were 4 new patients introducing themselves. And they were introducing themselves by their diagnosis. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm bipolar. Yikes. And I remember thinking, that's not who you are. That is your diagnosis, but it's not who you are at the core of your being. It is not who you are at all. And the same is true with grief. And I think people often take on this aura of grief that they think defines them. And for a period of time, it does. It certainly defines your current experience. There's no question about it. But it's still not who you are. And in the context of anger, regret, and guilt, the same is true. You are not your anger, you are not your regret, you are not your guilt. Those are things you're trying to make peace with, want to make peace with. They stem from an event or events prior to the death, around the time of death, in your grief. It could be any of those, or it could be long ago even. If you have issues with your spouse from early on in your relationship that never got resolved, that could be there too. As I see so many people who can get stuck in that place of this is who I am, and it becomes problematic. Not so much in the moment, but down the line as you're starting to rebuild your life, if you're still struggling with regret and guilt or anger, you're not building on a solid foundation. It's important to deal with. It matters to think about who you are when you're grieving, because one of the things that happens for most spouses in particular, it happens in other kind of relationships too, but spouses, your sense of self, your identity takes a huge hit, because when one's been married for decades, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, your identity is all tied up in that relationship and in the marriage and the life that you created together. That becomes the foundation you build on as you're moving forward. But one of the traps, if you will, is that because your sense of self has been compromised, a lot of people latch on to the grief as something that defines them. And you're not your grief any more than you're your anger, regret, guilt, fear, anything that comes up when you're grieving. You're not your grief. It is an experience you are having. There are lessons, there are impacts on your sense of self, and sometimes what it does is reveal who you are, how you respond to it, how you move through it, and how you decide to rebuild. All of those reflect and reveal something about who you are. But it's not the grief that's your identity. And the same is true with the anger and the regret and the guilt. You need to look at them. You need to figure out how to express them. You need to figure out how to resolve them, how to carry them with you moving forward. It's just something you have. It's something you've experienced. It's something that gets woven into who you are as you begin to step back out into the world. And it's a really important distinction. It's crippling. Honestly, it's crippling to try to move back out into the world to create a life when you are consumed by guilt and you think of yourself as a guilty person, or you think of yourself as someone filled with regrets. You think of yourself as an angry person and maybe even expressing your anger out in the world. That's not helpful. So the task really becomes figuring out what to do with it and how to make peace with it. It becomes an experience you've had, but it doesn't define your whole being and your whole life going forward. So, what do you do with it? How do you disengage from these feelings and disconnect them from your sense of self? You need to name them first of all. What happened? What happened? Then you need to explore it. Why did it happen? What made it possible? What were the different factors? And one of the big ones, certainly anything that happened around the time of death, often has to do with you simply did not have the bandwidth, the emotional bandwidth to deal with the situation the way you would now. That experience is so overwhelming that most people pretty much hanging on for dear life, just trying to get through it. And it challenges so much about how we think about life and how we think about our relationships and how we think about ourselves and all of that. Then you need to figure out, is there some action I need to be taking? Is there some way of making amends, either directly or by proxy? So rather than trying to avoid it and pretend you're not feeling that way or trying to forgive too fast or all of those things that people do, is just be present to it, explore it, get to know it, get to know what really happened, and dig down a little bit. Look at how you're responding to it. Is there something that you can learn from? Or you respond to it now better than you could then? There are lots of ways of looking at it, but that exploration is really important because in that exploration, you begin to unravel it and untangle it and find a place for it that does not consume your life, your sense of self, or anything else. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. I think when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't always, but come back and listen to it later if you need to. That works too. But really try to disidentify with these experiences you've had and just begin to think of them as experiences you are having, things you have to deal with, things you are dealing with, coping with, and trying to find peace with. So that's it for today. Take care. Talk soon. Bye bye. Oh, and I almost forgot. I talked about naming and processing the events that cause the regret, the guilt, or the anger. There's an exercise, you can get it in the descriptions, that will help with the naming. You might want to check it out.